It would be nice if there was a more formal way to confront racism in the community and homophobia and anti-Semitism or anti-whatever, but I'm not sure how that gets done.
My experience with being exposed to hateful comments or signs, of course, is not very pleasant. It's uncomfortable, it's offensive. Quite often it's more subtle than that. It's not blatant, outright statements. It's comments like, "Oh, that's so gay," or
screaming comments, probably in my earlier years. Quite often takes the form of something more subtle when people are, I think a lot of people are aware that if they outwardly express violent tendencies, that it's, it involves some risk for themselves too.
What is the context of this? Who is saying this? Why are they saying it? And then I step back and I go, okay, well, does this disturb me? Does this offend me? Quite often, very often it does.
It came out when I was 21 and first realized that I was gay when I was like 15.
Probably depends on what I hear and the severity of it. I can range from, uncomfortableness, kind of hurtful feelings, or, depends on how extreme it is, very angry.
But in general, I'd say empathy is the other main emotion that I experience when I see these sort of behaviors acted out in people. So
I guess it's probably as close as I can get to being in a war zone or survival mode.
It occurs in very subtle forms and probably forms that won't be detectable unless you are aware of that. You're not receiving the service that you should be receiving, or you're not getting that job that you should be getting, or you're not getting the housing that you should be getting.
It makes me realize how careful I have to be about how I speak and the impact that it can have on people. And it's like any comment, any name, anything. If you say, "You faggot," that has a different meaning than if, I say to my gay male friend, "You fag," It's not necessarily acceptable, but it is acceptable in the relationship, and it's meant in a completely different way.
Support services specific to hate crimes or hate behaviors, because I think we're not really talking about hate crimes, we're talking about behaviors that are, not punishable under the law.
It's not blatant violence. It's not, no one's getting physically hurt, but emotional hurt it can be as destructive.
About 5 years ago, I did a traditional salmon barbecue for one of our children's elementary schools here in the valley, and basically I set up for the whole day, and from start to finish I prepared a salmon barbecue in my ancestral way for the whole school, and so all staff and students were able to come out at some points in time and see the process, ask questions, and then shortly after lunch they were able to have samples of the food as well. And one of the classes near the end of the day, they stayed and had a question and answer period with me, and for the most part it was the typical curious questions kids have, and this was a grade 6 class at the time, and then one boy near the end of the question and answer period, he started to basically kind of get pretty annoyed at who I was and what I was doing there, and he was asking me how I got my fish, and I told him it was traditional, what we call food fish, ceremonial use, and for my own purposes what I want to do with it. And he somehow knew a little bit of background in that most Aboriginal people now go out because we've all been involved in the commercial fishing industry. We've got big commercial seine boats, 70, 80 feet long, and made of aluminum usually, and big nets and drums, and pretty mechanical. And he was kind of dominating this conversation. I was kind of answering him, and the teacher didn't really step in and do anything about it, but he went to the point of saying that you shouldn't even be doing it. If you want to get food fish, you should go back to using a spear, because you never had that technology, so you shouldn't be allowed to go use modern boats and use nets to catch your fish.
This is about an experience of anti-Semitism that I had when his mother, my mother-in-law, passed away. Had been living with a daughter in western Pennsylvania, which is very kind of redneck. There's very few Jewish people there. And at the funeral, the priest that was called to conduct the service was an evangelical priest. And so he began the service standing in front of my dead mother-in-law's casket, calling for those sinners who have not yet found Jesus to come up and be, saved. And I was shocked. I was just shocked, because I thought my mother-in-law would never condone a funeral like this. She knew I was Jewish and she accepted me. And I felt so alienated from the other mourners there who loved her as I did and my husband did. I was just shocked, and he said it in the beginning, he said it again at the end, and by the end I was just crying. Everybody thought I was grieving for my dead mother-in-law, but I was extremely hurt.
Essentially what it really boils down to is that you just need to bring attention to somebody else's behavior when it's wrong, as long as it's safe for you to do so, as long as it's not going to endanger you or endanger anybody else, that you bring attention to their behavior.
When people are taught to only respect people that are exactly the same as them, then this leads to generally, I think, feelings of superiority over other people, whether they're racially or ethnically different.
I think it's by clearly communicating how that happens for its citizens. So lots of communications out there, lots of poster boards with information on it.
Developing yourself so that you can look at someone and say no without having to even say anything or just walk away. I don't think we have to do a lot of confrontation or a lot of, big noise and stuff like that around stuff like this.
In the Comox Valley, I have had people throw vile, racist, and anti-Semitic comments at me on a personal level, but they were just very angry people who were just out of control.
It's just a good example of a quote from the great philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, that the surest way to corrupt the minds of youth is to teach them to hold in higher esteem those who think alike than those who think differently.
In one case, I confronted the gentleman who was doing this because his young grandchild was there with him. And I just turned to him and I said, "You should be ashamed of yourself. You should be ashamed of yourself. Look at what you're teaching your grandson."
Well, I think as a community, the first step that needs to be done is more people need to start raising their children to respect other people for what makes them different, instead of respecting other people for what they have in common with you.
People who do stuff like that are always also doing it for an audience. There's nobody who's going to look at it and say, "Hey, good, attaboy, good job." So.
And we talked about it. He kind of reframed it as, I'm not someone who believes in heaven and hell, and he thanked me, and then he said, if I could do it over again, I wouldn't have changed a word of what I said, because it's my job to proselytize. I just left in tears, and I never forgot that. I don't think anybody in his family, except my husband, knew what was really going on. I never discussed it with them, because I know that they love me in their way, but the lack of awareness of how hurt I was by his remarks, not just by him, but by the family, is something that has always kind of choked me. So.
To me, I was really appalled, who is this kid? And at first I was angry at what he was saying and who he was. But then I was thinking, where's he getting this information from? You know, he's in grade 6. He's hearing it from somebody.